often say this on the show, but celebrities are difficult people, let me tell you, you know. They want their own way all the time, and they have to be sure when they go to the red carpet and stuff like that, who goes before them, who goes after them, and whether they are the final big thing, you know. If you're a major star and you don't really care about that, you're not bothered. I remember attending an event at the Adelphi Theatre. I think it was the launch of a revival of Evita, and the brilliant rocker Sir Rod Stewart came along with his beautiful wife Penny Lancaster, and they came in at the last minute. And they came in truly at the last minute because they didn't want to talk to the press. They didn't need that. They were there to support Weber, the musical, that sort of stuff. They posed for pictures, moved in very quickly. Didn't need it. You know, that's when you realise that you actually have surpassed the level. Of course, you would have thought the same thing might have been the case for the wannabe royal. That was, of course, Wallis Simpson. But seemingly she had a seething resentment for a Hollywood icon that really went on for quite a few years. Let me explain. Morning, nice to see you. Thank you so much for your time. Lovely to have your company. Hollywood in the 1950s, you know, was a magical place, as one can imagine. I've interviewed many stars that told me all about the, you know, it was kind of like the breaking out period of where people were becoming independent. Stars wanted to control their own careers. The studio system was falling, but there were bigger than ever stars, from the likes, of course, of James Dean, Robert Wagner, Elizabeth Taylor, and this lady, Marilyn Monroe. Of course, from 1953 onwards, all thanks to Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire for 20th Century Fox, she became the ultimate pin-up for the next 10 years, literally making millions, billions in today's money for the studio. So you can understand why she was the sort of person that everybody wanted to be seen with. Now, what happened was, way back in the middle of the 50s in New York, a very, well, exclusive socialite called Elsa Maxwell had the best parties, absolutely. The good and the great were there, from Truman Capote to, well, everybody, you know. Donald Zeck over here, who was an esteemed gossip writer for the Daily Mirror. He went to those parties and got so many stories. But of course, she knew exactly how to mix the plot. And she knew exactly who the people wanted to meet. And a regular at those parties was none other than the former king and, of course, Wallis Simpson. Now, what was fascinating about Wallis and the former king is Elsa pointed out that they still believed that they were regal. Yes. Now, she couldn't work out, according to her memoirs, whether that there was the insistence of him or her. But either way, you know, they decided that they needed to be addressed as such, and people weren't necessarily allowed to either sit near them or talk to them without prior permission, because he believed that, you know, one day he was going to be recalled back and still made a big cheese in the royal court. Of course, we know that wasn't going to be the case. And what happened at this particular party, which was a huge party in New York City and attended by so many of the good and the greats, including Hollywood legends like Marlene Dietrich, was, well, this got back to Wallis Simpson, that, well, Marilyn Monroe was going to be in attendance, and she wasn't too fussed about that in the beginning. But then when she realised that Marilyn's, how shall we say, tardiness would result in her getting all the headlines, she felt it should be her and the king that were treated as the A-listers at this event. Elsa pointed out that no, you know, I can't control that. Marilyn will turn up when she turns up, and this would be good for you to be pictured with her. She didn't want to be pictured with her. She was younger, prettier, and maybe not slimmer, but nonetheless more powerful at that point. She didn't want to do it. So at the 11th hour, Wallis and David pulled out, hoping that this would make big news and push Marilyn off the front covers. It didn't, because the picture alongside Marilyn and Marlene Dietrich was one that took the headlines. But Wallis decided a few hours later that she'd in fact made a huge mistake and she should have gone to the party. But at this point, the party was winding down. Marilyn and Marlene had gone off along with the rest of them, and Wallis inquired who was still there. Should she zip over? Elsa said no, and the sort of friendship dwindled somewhat, right? There was nobody there. And what happened was that Wallis Simpson tried for many years to make sure that she could get pictured next to Marilyn Monroe, because, as she pointed out, we're two women leading the path. Yes, right. Now, what was interesting about this was that, obviously the Queen in 1956 met Marilyn at the Royal Film Performance when Marilyn was over here in England making The Prince and the Showgirl with Laurence Olivier. You get the picture. And that really pushed Wallis even on further. And so Wallis tried to get to the 1962 Golden Globe Awards, which was hosted by Rock Hudson, in order to engineer finally a picture. And what she wanted to do was meet the person who was guiding Marilyn up, which was Stephanie Powers. You see how this works now. But sadly, that wasn't to be. And the Golden Globes either didn't return or weren't interested. And for Wallis, she let Marilyn quite simply slip through her fingers. And she realised how many people were interested, particularly after the demise of Marilyn in 1962, in what the Queen and Marilyn could have possibly talked about. As she pointed out, imagine if we'd been pictured together, what they would have said about the two of us. Never a shy, retiring wallflower, wasn't our Wallis. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.